The following program is being brought to you on the Voice America Variety Channel. For more information about our network and to check our additional show hosts and topics of interest, please visit voiceamericavariety.com. The Voice America Talk Radio Network is the worldwide leader in live Internet talk radio. Visit voiceamerica.com. The views and ideas expressed on the following program are strictly those of the host or guests and do not necessarily reflect the views and ideas held by the Voice America Talk Radio Network, its staff, and management.
Welcome to Crime Prevention 101. We're so happy you joined us this week. Over the next hour, you'll learn the tips, tricks, and vital information that will help you keep yourself confident and safe. Now, here's your host, Susan Bartelstone.
Welcome to Crime Prevention 101, the personal safety radio show with an optimistic perspective on a sober subject. I'm your host, Susan Bartelstone. And I am so glad that you decided to tune in and hang out with me, because it's my great privilege to spend the next hour with you, helping you keep yourself safe. Now, tonight is Christmas Eve, and I wish a very happy holiday to those of you who are celebrating this auspicious occasion. And I know that no one wants to think about crime and violence on this really special night and in this very special month of peace and love and renewal, but hang in with me, because in that spirit of optimism that I promise you at the beginning of each and every show, I'm going to introduce you to 4 courageous people who want to tell you their stories tonight. People who've been victims of terrible crimes like home invasion, sexual assault, abuse of their children, and the murder of a parent, but went on to heal and are now helping others do the same. These are amazing and great stories of strength and determination and sheer guts. And I constructed tonight's show purposely to give you encouragement. So you know what? Get comfortable in your chair, grab something warm to drink or something that warms you, and stick with me for a while. Let my guests inspire you like they've inspired me. And if you know someone who should be listening to this show who might not be, why not send out a text message about us, send out an IM, start tweeting if you're on Twitter, anything so that they can join us too. First up, I'm going to introduce you to Art Hanson from Harpers Ferry, West Virginia, who, after having his home burglarized, started Nation of Neighbors, which is an online neighborhood watch and reporting site. And it offers free online tools for private citizens, community groups, local governments, and law enforcement. Art, welcome to Crime Prevention 101.
Thanks very much, Susan. Thanks for having me on.
It is my pleasure. Happy holidays.
You too. Thanks very much.
Art, let's start at the beginning. Tell me what happened to you. Talk about the burglary.
Sure. I came home. I'm not exactly sure which day it was, but I came home on a Sunday morning. It was back in October of 2004. We had one young son at the time. He was 2. So my wife, my son, and I had spent the night at her parents' house. They live a couple hours away from us, and the weather was kind of bad. But so they stayed there on Sunday, and I came home Sunday morning to feed the cats and just sort of check on everything. And I came in the house, and I noticed that there were just some things on the kitchen floor when I walked inside the door. And the first thing that I assumed was that the cats had, had made a mess. Mm-hmm. So I promptly scolded the cats and walked further into the kitchen and noticed that there were actual drawers that were pulled out and dumped upside down on the floor. And as I continued to walk through the house, I realized that it just sort of struck me that everything was in complete disarray. So literally, what had happened was someone had come into the house and they'd literally gone through everything, shredded it, then dumped it in a pile on the floor. And that was pretty much the case for every room in the house. The bedroom, all the closets were emptied, the drawers were emptied. Our son's piggy bank was actually smashed. They'd taken fruit snacks.
Took the pennies, huh? Took even the pennies.
Anything that they could get their hands on, and carry that, I guess they thought was of any possible value, including I work in technology, so wasn't a good idea in hindsight, but I'd left a couple laptops, on the table. They took those, pretty much anything they could carry out of the house. So the first thing I did is, after thinking, oh my, they could still be in the house, I'm not sure quite what I should do. I just found myself in that situation before. I walked out of the house with my cell phone and called the police. So that's sort of how the whole thing got started.
And I know that I have spoken to many people who were victims of a burglary, and it is a feeling of tremendous violation. And your safety and everything else is never the same. Your peace of mind in your home.
It is definitely a life-changing experience because it's, a space that you consider, sacred in your own. It's the place where you feel most safe in the world, and, realizing that it's not maybe quite as safe as you had once assumed is quite a change, a change to your mindset. That's for sure.
But instead of just saying, oh, well, I'll get a better security system, what did you do?
So when I talked to the police, they came in and looked around and filed a report. I started talking to the neighbors just to, I thought, well, we were broken into. Maybe someone else might be too, or maybe somebody knows something. So I talked to a couple of our immediate neighbors. We're in a fairly rural area. We also have a community mailbox, so I put a notice up on the mailboxes and phone number asking for information. And I got a lot more phone calls than I expected. Nobody had really specific information. Nobody could say, hey, here's who did it. But what I found out were people called me whose homes had also been recently broken into. So we have a community of about 320 homes, and there were almost 20 homes, I think, that had been recently broken into. And nobody in our community realized that there was a problem because, if a home got broken into and, it's unfortunate and they were upset, but nobody really, reached out and realized that they weren't the only ones. The police also, some of the calls were handled by the state police, some by the sheriff's office, so not even law enforcement really realized the extent of the problem. So what I did is just started, I talked to various neighbors and people who had been broken into, and we started to put all those little pieces together, and we were able to certainly tell a more compelling story than any one of us could have individually. A happy ending to my specific case was I did enough legwork to figure that these were probably young adults or kids, and they were probably on foot. So I actually set out and started looking to see maybe what route they'd taken, and sure enough, I found that they'd stolen fruit snacks that were intended for our son, but they ate them along the way and discarded some wrappers. So
like a trail of breadcrumbs, right?
Exactly. Then I found a point in the woods where they had, gotten a little lazy. I guess they were tired of carrying everything, so they started sorting through it, and they discarded some of my work papers. Eventually, I found most of our belongings and some other people's belongings stashed in a sort of a little cave or a shelter out in the woods. And that same technique is I've actually been able to use a couple times since in our neighborhood also to find things, and in other neighborhoods as well. So just a side note, especially if you're in a more rural area, if you're missing some items, whether from your car or your house, take a look around the immediate area for obvious sort of hiding places. A lot of times, something will be stashed that they maybe don't want to be seen carrying, and they'll plan on coming back for it later.
You were lucky that you weren't dealing with professionals, and I think that's it's good to make that distinction because that's a very valid technique for the kind of burglary you had. Now, let me jump ahead a little bit. So from there, you started the Watch program, and then you went on to develop Nation of Neighbors. Talk about Nation of Neighbors.
Well, what Nation of Neighbors does, so the hypothesis behind it is that by sharing information, just as we found with that initial burglary to my house and others in my community, by sharing information between neighbors and between law enforcement and neighbors and law enforcement, so everybody who's invested in the community, you're able to maybe not prevent every crime, and certainly not solve every crime, but you're able to put all the little pieces together in one place, and hopefully you're going to be able to make your community that much safer. You're going to be that much better off. So I could give you some examples of how this has worked over the past few years.
Sure.
And this has grown organically, I guess you could say. We started out as we added it to our community's HOA site, and a few reports came trickling in. There was another local community that was having a similar problem, so they joined us, and we've sort of grown from there. Just this last June, we've actually launched nationally, and we now offer our tools for free nationwide.
And how many people are joining with you now?
Currently, we have about 1,000 active members spread between 40 and 50 active community groups across the country.
Excellent.
And that's
so now give me an idea of how this works.
Sure. A couple cases that we've had are one of my favorites that I like to tell is a story actually in a community that's in Jefferson County. There were some pavers, and I use that with quotes. They were calling themselves pavers, driveway pavers. And they were basically con artists, but they were scammers, but they were going through the neighborhood and offering to pave people's driveways for a ridiculous amount of money, and if someone took them up on it, they would demand even more money, and then they'd skip town and move off to somewhere else.
Common scam.
Yep, it is very common. What happened was a couple people in the community reported them through Nation of Neighbors, and it got to the point where when you file the report, it goes out immediately to all the other members locally. So people literally knew to expect them when they pulled up. So because they were expecting them, they were able to, they knew that they needed to be getting a good description. They knew that they needed to be actually reading the license plate number on the truck. And these people were identified, and the information was sent to law enforcement, and they were able to rather quickly respond and deal with the problem, and they probably otherwise wouldn't have been able to do that. And certainly,
I think that's fantastic. I think that's one of the best uses of online, the internet, in terms of crime prevention, and I really love it. I think that's excellent. Okay. And I went to your website, and give the name of the website. People can get in touch with.
Nation of Neighbors, and that you can go to www.nationofneighbors.com, or you can Google Nation of Neighbors.
I went there, and there's lots of good crime prevention material on there. It's a nice-looking website. I think that's probably because you're a technology person.
It is an extension of what I do for a living, so it's a good fit for me, I guess.
And you got some success stories there, I think, and again, I think that this is one of the best ways that we can work together, as you say, a nation of neighbors. So it's nationofneighbors.com, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Art, thank you so much for being with me today. I've got more great stories for you coming up, and there's plenty of show left to tune in for, so please start tweeting about us. And you know what? You can follow me on Twitter, and you can follow me on Facebook, too. I'd love to have you as a friend.
Thank you very much, and I enjoyed being on your show.
Thank you, Art.
Thank you.
Ask the experts. Call toll-free right now, 1-866-472-5787. And ask our All-Star team to answer your question. That's 1-866-472-5787.
Thank you for calling.
VoiceAmerica.com. After more than 17 years' experience teaching safety skills to thousands of women and men, crime prevention and personal safety expert Susan Bartelstone concluded that by thinking and responding quickly, ideally within 20 seconds, potentially violent criminal encounters can be prevented. Using techniques from many different disciplines and illustrated by 60 real-life examples and success stories, Susan shows how it's done in her new book, Think Fast and Prevent a Violent Crime: How to Respond to Danger in 20 Seconds or Less. Check out www.crimeprevention101.com for more information.
Technology is changing the way we live our lives and how we do business. On CIO Talk Radio, we talk about the benefits of technology and the great things it allows us to do, as well as its risks. Heard every Wednesday at 9 a.m. Central, 7 a.m. Pacific, Sanjol Gall interviews business leaders and other experts that are shaping the way we use technology. To learn more about the show, visit www.ciotalkradio.com. Keep up with the changing world of technology and listen to CIO Talk Radio with Sanjol Gall. Listen in every Wednesday at 9 a.m. Central, 7 a.m. Pacific, right here on Voice America Business.
Are you sick of your career? Looking to escape the confines of a job, your boss, a long commute, no future, and low pay? What if there was a show that could help you start your own business? It's time to become your own entrepreneur. Tune in to Entrepreneur Live with Ray and John, featuring entrepreneurs Ray Burden and John Bronson. It's an atmosphere of total encouragement, secrets, and direction. Tune in every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific Time, 1 p.m. Eastern Time on the Voice America Business Channel.
Streaming live, the leader in Internet talk radio, voiceamerica.com.
You're listening to Crime Prevention 101 with Susan Bartelstone. Susan would like to remind you that no absolutes exist in a crime scenario, and no advice can possibly address every variable. Each situation should be evaluated individually and responded to in a way you instinctively judge best. It's Susan's aim on this show to provide you with the information and options that will help you make that instinctive assessment quickly and safely. And if you're already a survivor of the kind of crime we're talking about on the show today, or any other crime for that matter, please remember that there are no right or wrong responses in a criminal encounter, and nothing that happened to you was your fault. Even if you think you used bad judgment in a situation and left yourself vulnerable, that's never an excuse for a crime or for violence. So please, call yourself a survivor, not a victim, and understand that with time, distance, and the proper professional help, you can put what happened into perspective and get on with your life. If you'd like to share your stories, tips, or suggestions for topics you'd like us to cover, send your comments to solutions@fightsafe.com, and Susan may address some of them on future shows. That email address again, solutions@fightsafe.com. Now, back to Crime Prevention 101.
Hi, Susan Bartelstone here. If you're just tuning in, I'm now going to introduce you to Vicki Polin. And don't forget that I'm going to link all my guests on my website, crimeprevention101.com, and you're going to be able to share each and every show with your email it to your friends if they may have missed it. All right, so next up, meet Vicki Polin from Baltimore, Maryland. She is a child abuse and sexual assault survivor, and as a result, she became a licensed clinical professional counselor, specializing in sexual trauma, and has been helping others for more than 25 years. She's also the founder of the Awareness Center of the International Jewish Coalition Against Sexual Abuse and Assault. And this is an organization that helps Jewish survivors of sexual violence and those who support them. And in the fall of 2009, Vicki was nominated for the Jewish Community Heroes Award for her extraordinary work. Hi, Vicki. Welcome to Crime Prevention 101.
Thank you so much, Susan.
It's my pleasure to have you. Well, let's go back a little bit. Let's start at the beginning. Talk about some of the things that happened to you that changed your life and brought you to the place that you're at, whatever you feel comfortable with in talking about.
Right. Well, I'm an incest survivor, and we're going to flash back to like 1979, and I was having a very difficult time dealing with my abuse. And I started doing a lot better, and then in 1983, I was sexually assaulted by someone who I knew. And during that time period, it was before rape crisis centers were in existence, before there was any real help that I could find. I was pregnant from the rape. It was an ectopic pregnancy, and the man who assaulted me was stalking me, and there was no stalking laws on the books. And
that's right. It was much later.
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, I said that's right. It was much, much later before we got any kind of legal help.
Right. There was no rape crisis centers. I was raped in November of '83, and the Sexual Assault Act in Illinois, where I was assaulted, took place January 1st. So if he would have raped me a few months later, I could have had some protection.
Awful.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Everything that you could imagine could go wrong. He got a year of probation or supervision for harassing phone calls after the assault. No charge on the sexual assault itself. And on the year anniversary, he kept trying to find me, and so I called the police, and then there was a rape crisis center. This is back in 1986. And so I got all the help that I needed. I started realizing that, the abuse as a child wasn't my fault. The rape wasn't my fault. And I started to feel empowered, and I went back to school. It was also because my rape crisis counselor started having me come and do public speaking, and I started realizing that I wasn't alone. And because of that, I went back to school, and I got my degrees, and I basically dedicated my life to helping other survivors to learn that they're not alone.
Which is extremely important in terms of healing and helping others heal, and that's exactly what we're talking about today. Right. Let's jump ahead a little bit. How did the Awareness Center and the International Jewish Coalition come along against sexual abuse come along?
Well, back in, I think it was 85, 86, I started volunteering for an organization called Voices in Action, which is no longer around. And when I was there, I realized there were no resources for Jewish survivors, and I kept telling other people to start something. And nobody ever did. And, I went to school, I got my degrees, I started working in the field, and for whatever reason it was, I ended up living in Israel. And when I was there, I realized there were no resources for Jewish survivors because people started coming up to me and telling me about what happened to them, and especially in the religious world, there were no resources. So I started sending out emails to anything that looked Jewish saying, I want to start this organization. When I started transforming my private practice webpage into the Awareness Center, and eventually I came back to the United States and moved to Baltimore. We got incorporated, and we've been growing ever since. When the Awareness Center first got started, and you would Google, sexual abuse Jewish or incest Jewish or anything like that, all you would find would be anti-Semitic sites and porn sites. And today, just about, there's always newspaper articles coming out now because of the push and the education that we did. When we first got started, I couldn't get the rabbis to get involved, and basically they were saying it's not a problem in our community. And so they're like, show me 5 or 10 cases. So I was Googling, rabbi sexual abuse, Jewish sexual abuse, and I found, the 5 to 10 cases. And then each time a rabbi wanted that, I would have to re-email this whole list. So finally I decided, I'm just going to put it up on the web page and send them the links. That would be a lot easier and save me a lot of time. Well, then different survivors started contacting me and saying, well, you have this one up. Why don't you have my offender up? I was like, well, send me some documentation, and they started sending me the documentation, which was either, court papers or newspaper accounts from reputable papers. And before you knew it, we had this explosion of cases.
So it's not just 5 or 10 cases.
No.
No.
I mean, if you read the news about what's going on in Brooklyn, it's almost every day another rabbi or somebody, in the community is being exposed as being a sex offender.
It's and what's even more horrible, if you can even use those words, is the idea is that this is somebody you look up to, that you trust, that's supposed to guide you and help you find God in your life. And when they betray you, it's just shattering.
Right. Well, what I think is really interesting, from what I've been reading and what I've been told, it's somewhere between 2 to 5% of all cases involve clergy.
Really?
Yeah, it's only 2 to 5%. The majority of cases happen in the home. It's 46%. I mean, it's, with either a parent, a grandparent, a sibling, an aunt, an uncle, it's happening in the home. And it's just, all we do is focus on clergy. It's like most people who go into the clergy are not offenders. Most are respectable, but the problem we have is that they're covered up. And
exactly.
Each offender will molest on an average of 117 times in their lifetime, and that's an old statistic.
That's right.
And
I think that a lot of people don't report this either, as you mentioned, because you just don't want to. Nobody really wants to believe that a religious leader is going to do this to somebody, and it is covered up. It was a very interesting. I love your website. Give out the address of the website.
Sure, it's www.theawarenesscenter.org.
And it was very interesting, and there is now starting to be rabbinic support. What other kinds of services do you have? There's a lot of information on this website.
Right.
Talk about some of the services that you provide through the website.
Okay. Well, right now, we're a nonprofit organization with 501c3 status. We do public speaking. We're a clearinghouse of information. Basically, anything and everything you want to know about sexual violence in the Jewish community, but we're afraid to ask, we can provide that. We also kind of act as like the Make-A-Wish Foundation for Jewish survivors of sex crimes. So basically, when they call or write to us and we find out what it is that they're wanting, we try to help them have that happen. Sometimes, if it's a woman, she may be looking for a gynecologist that would be sensitive to her needs, or sometimes it's a survivor who wants to tell somebody else what happened to them. Sometimes they're looking for a lawyer or a therapist or, just a support group. Whatever it is that they need, we try to make happen. We can't guarantee anything, but we do our best to connect people to whatever kind of services that they need.
Specifically within the Jewish community. They're sensitive to...
Right. We do get people calling who are not Jewish, and we also, refer them to other organizations, But because the Jewish world never had any resources, it's like I was trying to fill that gap.
Mm-hmm. And there are some very interesting postings about different rabbis that have been accused or convicted of crimes, and I think that is a tremendous service. Right. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of the cases that you cite on there, just quickly?
Well, we don't only work in the Orthodox world, and people keep focusing in on that. There's a case of a Rabbi Mordechai Gaffney. He now goes by Mark Gaffney. He keeps changing his name and his identity. He started molesting kids back in the 80s. There's 2 teenage girls who I know. And, he fled. He started in New York, went to Florida, and then he went to Israel. And when he was in Israel, he changed his name. And then he started grooming adult women. And when he was about to be caught, he fled Israel and came back to the United States. And he's now living in Salt Lake City, Utah, and getting involved in the Buddhist community because no Jewish community will have him anymore.
Really?
Yeah. It's like, unfortunately, what I'm talking about just doesn't happen in the Jewish world. It happens, across denominations. Where,
we certainly know what happens in the Catholic Church. It's been getting more and more press anyway.
Right. Well, pedophilia has no religion. I just want to specify that. It's not about being Catholic or about being Jewish or being Buddhist or Muslim or, any other religion that's out there. It's about, individuals who seek careers where they have access to their prey. There's a huge problem with scout leaders or with teachers or with babysitters,
sure.
And so it's like I just want to specify that it's not just rabbis or it's not just priests or pastors or monks or what other name you want to call them.
Right, no, of course. It's, and as you say, maybe only 2 or 3% of these kinds of crimes are committed, or maybe we don't even know, but it's not the largest portion.
Right. But what I found interesting was back in June I spoke at the NOW conference, National Organization for Women, on a panel, and I just learned that the majority of cases of clergy abuse involved adult women and their minister or pastor or rabbi. And so when I learned that, I went back and I was looking at our webpage and, where we list all of our alleged and convicted sex offenders, our registry. And I found that same pattern. I just never paid attention to that before. And it's an area that we're just not even talking about yet.
Well, that's why I'm glad that this organization is around, and I know you do a lot of public speaking about this subject.
Right, and we also have been active in trying to help facilitate that the laws change across the country, with the statute of limitations being lifted on filing a civil suit, on sex crimes, especially those against children, because on average, somebody won't come forward about their abuse until they're in their 40s, 50s, or beyond. And how can you expect to know how abuse has affected your life until you've had a chance to live your life?
Absolutely.
And every time, every time, we are able to name an offender in the news media, we find other victims of that same perpetrator.
Well, Vicki, you're absolutely right. And thank you so much for doing the work that you're doing and for being with me today. Give out that website one more time.
TheAwarenessCenter.org.
www.awarenesscenter.org. Make sure you check Vicki Polin out on that and her website. And when we come back, we've got more amazing stories, so I don't even want you to blink.
News, opinion, your voice counts. Call toll-free 1-866-472-5787. 1-866-472-5787. VoiceAmerica.com.
After more than 17 years' experience teaching safety skills to thousands of women and men, crime prevention and personal safety expert Susan Bartelstone concluded that by thinking and responding quickly, ideally within 20 seconds, potentially violent criminal encounters can be prevented. Using techniques from many different disciplines and illustrated by 60 real-life examples and success stories, Susan shows how it's done in her new book, Think Fast and Prevent a Violent Crime: How to Respond to Danger in 20 Seconds or Less. Check out www.crimeprevention101.com for more information.
Are you ready to learn all about NASCAR from an insider's perspective? Join Eddie DeHaan every week for the NASCAR Insider. It's an interactive look at the world of NASCAR, from the drivers to the crew chiefs. You'll hear from top-flight NASCAR guests that the other shows only wish they could have. Hear about last week's recap, this week's news, and more. Call in to interact with Eddie and his guests every Tuesday afternoon at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific, exclusively on the Power Up Motorsports channel.
Are you ready to get freed up? Join Dr. Jennifer Freed, one of America's leading psychological thinkers, for a groundbreaking program with fascinating guests and full participation from you. Freed Up will explore topics like liberation in long-term relationships, parenting in the 21st century, comfort in stressful times, and much more. Tune in to Freed Up every Wednesday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific Time, 11 a.m. Eastern Time on the Voice America Variety Channel, and wake up to the heartbeat of your life.
The Internet's #1 talk station. #1 talk station. VoiceAmerica.com.
You're listening to Crime Prevention 101 with Susan Bartelstone. We invite you to share your stories, tips, or suggestions for topics you'd like us to cover, and Susan will address some of these on future shows. Send your story or idea to solutions@fightsafe.com. That email address again is solutions@fightsafe.com. Now, back to Crime Prevention 101 with Susan Bartelstone.
This is Crime Prevention 101. Thanks for tuning in today. And don't forget to check out my crimeprevention101.com blog site, where you can look at what we're talking about, see pictures of my guests. You can also get in my mailing list, and that way you can never miss a show. Next up, I want you to meet Polly Franks. She is the mother of 2 daughters who were victimized by a former neighbor who, unknown to her, was a serial sex offender. Her story has quite a dramatic twist to it that you're not going to believe, and is a tribute to her strength and determination. I'm going to let her tell you about this herself. In 2006, she founded the Franks Foundation, and that is a nonprofit organization dedicated to protecting children from sexual predators. She's also on the founding board member of the National Coalition of Victims in Action. Polly has been interviewed by just about every major TV show, Dateline NBC, 2020, Court TV, John Walsh Show, and so forth. Polly, welcome to Crime Prevention 101.
Thank you so much.
What a pleasure to talk with you. Now, let's go back to the beginning. Talk about what happened that started you on this path.
Sure. We were friends with a couple who lived around the corner from us, and their daughter was in school with our daughter, and they became fast friends, and we had no idea that this man had been known a few years prior as the ski mask rapist of San Antonio, Texas. They had let him go free in exchange for treatment, and I use the term lightly, and had put him on probation, even though his own attorney admitted that he was linked in Texas to at least 200 victims. Most of them were children.
And they let him go. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yes, they did. They put him through this treatment program at Johns Hopkins Hospital, and basically beyond that left him to monitor himself. So he moved into my neighborhood, and you hear this, people say this all the time, but he really did seem like a nice guy. You cannot tell by looking at these individuals what they are, and which is why I am so committed to keeping the Megan's Law on the books, because this was prior to the passage of Megan's Law.
Mm-hmm.
And there was
Megan's Law, just for people that don't know, is a way to find out if there is a sex offender in your neighborhood.
Absolutely. So anyway, we didn't know anything about him having any kind of a criminal history at all, and we had been friends for many years. And then one night he attacked my daughters while they were spending the night with his daughter at his house. It took our local authorities 2 months to decide that they would even arrest him, which angered me. And once they arrested him, they decided that they would just give him a suspended sentence and let him go.
Sure.
And so I later on discovered that he had been known in Richmond as the Bandana Bandit, and was linked to at least 86 cases here in Richmond. So where I live. So I was so angry that I became a licensed private investigator just to go after him myself, because I felt like we weren't being taken seriously.
And I think that is incredible. You went and got yourself licensed for the sole purpose of bringing this predator to justice.
Yes.
And the result, Polly?
Well, it took 3 years, but finally he is now in prison for life without parole.
And the other thing that I think is so amazing about this is that, Polly, you're in a wheelchair.
Yes. I have a disability, and that, frankly, I wondered if he thought that we would be more vulnerable because of that, or if I was just literally going to roll over and play nice. And, of course, he's got the rest of his life in a small cell to contemplate that flawed theory. But I was just a very angry mother, and we had a restraining order, but the neighbors were seeing him in our yard in the middle of the night. I would call the police. They did nothing. So I really felt like we were on our own, and something had to be done.
And you brought him to justice.
It took a long time.
Well, and unfortunately, because they can move around and they can evade reporting if they have to. If they even are mandated to report, they can do that by moving around. And I just think it's incredible. Have you done more work along this line for other people in terms of a private investigator?
Well, I'm no longer a licensed private investigator, so I don't do any PI work specifically. We've had a case last year where a victim asked me to find out what had happened to his predator, and I did, and I found that the predator, who incidentally had gone to jail for sexually assaulting this child victim who had been one of his students, I found out that guy was a tenured professor at the University of Georgia. And they had never even checked him, done any kind of background check when they hired him and then subsequently gave him tenure. So
you were able to shed a little light on that, I guess.
Oh yes, I called the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and they took it from there. And we also saw to it that the university was contacted directly to let them know what was on their staff. So he was out of there within 24 hours.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
All right, Polly, let's talk about the Franks Foundation.
Okay.
Tell me about what it does, who does it reach out to, and some of the services that it provides.
Well, our biggest program is our main thing that we do right now is Operation Fuzzy, which is a program for sexually abused children in hospital emergency rooms. And Operation Fuzzy was created with the help of a forensic nurse examiner at our local hospital, whom I later found out was the lead forensic nurse examiner for the state of Virginia, where I live. And what we do is we provide stuffed animals for these children, brand new stuffed animals, so the child can point to where they've been harmed on the animal, and the nurse can then point on the animal to how and where they're going to be examined, and then the child can hold on to it for comfort during the examination and interview process.
And of course, wonderful.
And of course, it's for the child to keep as well. We also provide pads of drawing paper and either crayons or markers, depending on the age of the child, and we wrap it all up in a child-themed pillowcase to look like a present. And that way the child can give a history of their abuse through art therapy, and quite often those pictures are then used in court to convict these predators. So it's all done in a non-threatening, very low-tech way, but it's been very effective.
That's fantastic. And you do a lot of also work in terms of educating parents.
Yes. Well, one of the biggest deterrents I have found to keeping America's children safe, and this is a terrible thing to say, but one of the biggest deterrents has been the parents. Not because they want to be, but it's usually been denial on the part of the parents. They don't want to think that they've got anybody in their neighborhood who's capable of doing this. They want to think that they live in Mayberry, and I wish we did, but Mayberry's not here. Mayberry's gone. I'm always telling people, look up your sex offender registry, find out, and sure enough, just about every time I do that with someone, they look up someone and they find somebody either in their neighborhood or their child's babysitter's neighborhood, along their jogging trails or whatever. People, it's a small step. It doesn't cost you any money, and it can save a life.
Absolutely. How many people, do you have any idea, have taken advantage of the site, or do people join it? How can they tune in and get some help from you?
First thing I tell them to do is to look up as far as the registry itself, familywatchdog.us. That's a nationwide site, and I urge people to do that. That's very important, and you can get email updates if a predator has moved into your neighborhood. They can certainly join the Franks Foundation. We're on Facebook. We also have a website, franksfoundation.org. People can join. They can support us. They can certainly email me through the website. And a lot of times through social networking and that type of thing, we've been able to help victims from various parts of the country who need help. Find somebody, say, who needs to know the laws of New Jersey, for instance, or San Diego. We try to find someone who can help them, because quite often people ask me questions, and if it's about their local laws, I don't know it. So I'll try to find someone who will help them, walk them through a case, and get them a crime victim advocate in their community. So we do an awful lot of work through that as well.
And how many Project Fuzzies are there? That is something that should be in every hospital that sees child sex abuse victims.
Well, that's our goal. We want to be nationwide. Right now we're serving in 16 hospitals in 4 different states. And I believe it's Tennessee, West Virginia, and Alaska right now. But we do want to take it nationwide.
Now, I've got a couple of names of people. Are you in New York at all? I've got some names from hospital people in New York that maybe we can hook you up with that and get some stuff here if you're not.
That would be wonderful.
All right. You and I are going to stay in touch after this show, and we're going to see how I can help you further. Give out that website one more time, Polly.
Okay, well, there's two websites. The first one, franksfoundation.org, is my website. And then again, for everyone to please check your sex offender registry at familywatchdog.us.
Okay. Thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you.
No, my pleasure. Now, this is Crime Prevention 101. I've got one more inspiring story coming up in just a few seconds. Don't touch that mouse.
Ask the experts. Call toll-free right now, 1-866-472-5787. And ask our all-star team to answer your question. That's 1-866-472-5787.
Thank you for calling.
VoiceAmerica.com. After more than 17 years' experience teaching safety skills to thousands of women and men, crime prevention and personal safety expert Susan Bartelstone concluded that by thinking and responding quickly, ideally within 20 seconds, potentially violent criminal encounters can be prevented. Using techniques from many different disciplines and illustrated by 60 real-life examples and success stories, Susan shows how it's done in her new book, Think Fast and Prevent a Violent Crime, How to Respond to Danger in 20 Seconds or Less. Check out www.crimeprevention101.com for more information.
Are you ready to go green? You've asked, and we've heard you. Voice America presents the Green Talk Network. Environmental topics are at the forefront of our society, and the Green Talk Network is here to keep you up to date on the latest trends and new innovations for the eco-conscious lifestyle. We'll help promote a variety of ideas on the environment, from global warming issues to how you can become more eco-friendly in your daily activities. Be a part of the solution, not the problem. Visit the Green Talk Network page on voiceamerica.com and tune in to help spread the green.
Do you feel the need for speed? Whatever your addiction, NASCAR, IndyCar, NHRA, Formula One, Grand Am, or even lawnmower racing, Pit Pass USA has got you covered. Larry Henry here, the host of Pit Pass USA. I put my 30-plus years of being a motorsports broadcaster around the world to work each week to bring you not only the best guests, but also the most interesting guests in racing, while also never forgetting the local weekend warriors. Pit Pass USA with Larry Henry, your front row seat to the world of racing. Tuesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific on the Power Up channel. Be there or get a DNF.
Stimulating talk.
Gets those synapses in the brain firing really fast.
All the time. The #1 Internet talk station where your opinion counts. VoiceAmerica.com.
You're listening to Crime Prevention 101 with Susan Bartelstone. We invite you to share your stories, tips, or suggestions for topics you'd like us to cover, and Susan will address some of these on future shows. Send your story or idea to solutions@fightsafe.com. That email address again is solutions@fightsafe.com. Now, back to Crime Prevention 101 with Susan Bartelstone.
This is Susan Bartelstone. Welcome back. And I just want to remind you that Crime Prevention 101 is available on iTunes. You don't even have to be at your computer to listen to me. Okay, so now last but not least, I want you to meet Lavoyed Hudgins. After his father was murdered in a robbery, Lavoyed began his law enforcement career in Montgomery, Alabama, 1978, and he eventually served as a chief of police in many different cities, including one of the larger departments in the nation. He was most recently serving as special assistant to the governor of Kentucky, and he also was a deputy commissioner of the Kentucky Department of Public Protection. He's written extensively and published internationally and nationally, and he has operated the Public Service Employees Association, which is a membership website that lists nationwide public safety government jobs since 1994. And welcome to Crime Prevention 101, Lavoyed.
Thanks very much, Susan.
Now, one of the reasons I particularly wanted you to tell your story on the show today is to bring home the point that when somebody becomes a crime victim, everybody around them becomes a crime victim as well, and suffers along with them and goes through life changes too. So let's go back and talk a little bit about your father and what happened and how that changed your life and put you in the direction that you went.
Sure, be glad to. Well, my dad was a Baptist minister, and as you can probably tell from the accent, I'm from the South. Mm-hmm. And he had left the ministry way back in 1977 and kind of opened what I would call just a little junk store, actually, in Montgomery, Alabama. And one night he was late coming home. My mother asked me to, she called and said, would you go check on your dad? So I drove to his store. It was a very, very cold night, January the 18th, 1977. There had been an ice storm that had come through the city, some snow. And I walked in his store. I found him lying behind the cash register in a pool of blood. He had been robbed, beaten, shot and killed with his own gun for about $17. And I knelt in his blood, and I held him in my arms. And I thought to myself, why would anyone want to do this to such a kind, gentle man? And, you know, that's a pretty seminal moment in someone's life. And so I decided that I was going to get into law enforcement, and not just in a sense of I want to lock up the bad guys, because certainly you do that, but let's face it, I'm not sure that system works the way it should, but I wanted to get in to be able to help people, to make a difference in someone's life, and I was very fortunate, and I was able to do that, I think.
Now, how old were you when your father was murdered, did you say?
Oh, goodness, I was 77. That was, 32 years ago. I was 24 years old.
And you were doing something else at the time, and that just turned it around, and you decided to go into law enforcement. Yes,
I did, and I'll never forget. In my interview with the Montgomery Police Department, someone told me, "Well, when they interview you, don't tell them that you want to make a difference, because you can't make a difference." Well, that's wrong. You can make a difference.
And you found that, and how were you able, very quickly, to just let's talk about how were you able to make that difference, do you think? Oh
gosh, Susan, just along the way, my paths crossed so many people that needed help. Whether that help was just a kind word or to direct them to someone else who could help them on a long-term basis. I can't tell you how many times I was able to do that, and there was a particularly poignant incident way back in 1990 with a little girl that I was able to help, and you know that stuck with me all these years, and so you know anytime you're able to make a positive difference in someone else's life, even if it's just for a moment, you've accomplished something.
Well, I thank you so much for that, because we don't usually think of law enforcement coming from that place. And I want to remind everybody that most people really are in it to try and help. Lavoyed, we're closing out the show. Just give out your website for people who are interested in public service jobs. And this is nationwide.
Yes, absolutely. It's PSEA.
Law enforcement, fire.
Yes, law enforcement, fire, or any other. It's all local government jobs. PSEA.com, and I will be happy to help someone personally. They can email me if they are searching for something. I'd love to help them.
Well, Lavoyed, thank you so much. I looked at your website. It's very interesting for people that want that kind of career. I thank you for being on Crime Prevention 101 with me and telling your story.
Thank you, Susan, for what you are doing. It's very, very important work, and I'm really impressed with it.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure. Well, my friends, that is a wrap for now. But never fear, because you and I will be doing this again next week. Don't forget that I'm going to be putting links to all my guests on my Voice America host page and on my crimeprevention101.com website. So if you want more information about any of the show topics or you want to get in touch with any of my guests, you can do so right from there. Next week and the next two shows, I'm going to be doing more about healing and renewal and giving back and keeping with the spirit of the season. Next week, you're going to meet Kim Estes, a mother who, after a pedophile with hundreds of victims, tried to kidnap 2 girls from her child's school, and another friend, kids got posted on a pedophile website, photos of them, decided enough was enough and formed an amazing organization. You're going to meet Ellen Snortland, author of the classic book Beauty Bites Beast, who, after becoming a crime victim herself, became a self-defense instructor and advocate for women to awaken the warrior within them. And you're also going to meet Michelle Renee, who, along with her 7-year-old daughter, was kidnapped, held hostage, had explosives taped to her, and was forced to rob the bank where she was a branch manager. And she now works with survivors of violence and abuse, and her book, Held Hostage, was made into a Lifetime Network movie, just airing this past July. So this is going to be an awesome show. If you want to send me a comment or a suggestion for a show, all you got to do is email me, solutions@fightsafe.com. Don't forget to check out my website, crimeprevention101.com, and stay tuned for next week because it would be a crime not to listen. I want you to stay tuned and stay safe.
We hope you got some useful information and inspiration this week on Crime Prevention 101. Susan Bartelstone invites you to join us again next Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific and 8 p.m. Eastern Time here on Voice America. If you want to learn more about Susan's guest, sign up for her newsletter, or find out about upcoming teleseminars and workshops, go to www.crimeprevention101.com today. Have a great week and a safe week.
Thanks again for listening to the preceding program, brought to you on the Voice America Variety Channel. For more information about our network and to check out additional show hosts and topics of interest, please visit voiceamericavariety.com. The Voice America Talk Radio Network is the worldwide leader in live Internet talk radio. Visit voiceamerica.com. The views and ideas expressed on the preceding program are strictly those of the host or guests and do not necessarily reflect the views and ideas held by the Voice America Talk Radio Network, its staff, and management.